Tunesh man. I'm in Tosh in the kitchen. So, can you all hear me? Yes? Okay. So I don't need this then.
Well,
if at any point you're not hearing, just let us know immediately. There's nothing worse than sitting through a talk and not being able to hear. Anyway, when I was asked to interview a gingerly-haired entrepreneur, businessman with Broad Bay connections, I thought, I've made it. I'm going to interview Donald Trump. But after watching himself and Zelensky tonight, I thought, I'm the lucky one. Thanks for coming. It's pretty holler outside, but anyway, it'll warm up in here, no doubt, very shortly. The whole thing is going to be recorded. It'll go out on the YouTube channel. We're delighted with the number of views that we've had. Don, how many did the whalers get eventually? And that was in Gaelic.
Well over 1,000.
Yeah, it was 1,000 within about 10 days. So we know that that video was watched by a group of, I think it was 8 or 10 expats over in New Zealand the night it went out. So that's great to hear that we've got that reach. Depending on the flow of conversations, he's told me that he can talk for but depending on the flow of the conversation, we might stop halfway through, have a cuppa, and then finish off like we did with the whalers. It's my first time.
That's called if I get boring, you see.
It's my first time doing it. Connor is usually in the chair, but he's asked for us to start building capacity. No, I think it's only fair that we take turns doing this kind of thing. If I miss anything, if I don't pick up on any points that Gordon's talking about, if you want further explanation, please stick your hand up. This is very, very informal. Don't be afraid to interrupt. Stick your hand up. Ask for a repetition of whatever he said or for further information. Effie, Cavello, but then as you usually do, tell them what's right, what's wrong, keep them on the right track. You've been doing that for how many years now? 51, I thought. That's right. Nesha, the formalities. Should the fire escape? So, make your way very quickly that way if there's a fire. Toilets are there if you have an emergency in that. Make your way even more quickly in that direction. Tonight's format is the Broad Bay version of basically This Is Your Life. Now, as Michael Aspel would say to start the programme, Gordon Maclennan was born to Murachulishtenbeek and Marjorie at 15 Call on, I don't know your birthday.
12th December 1952.
12th December 1952.
Had the same birthday as my father, 12/12.
Okay. So, Gordon took much persuasion to get him out here. We're glad to have him with us. So let's kick off with finding out a little bit about both your mother and your father's side of the family.
Okay. How close do you have to be to this to hear? Can you all hear? I'm amazed that there's so many of you here. And if you hear a commotion in the room, Effie's agreed to fake a faint should I get stuck. So I was born in 1952. I have a brother, Donny, who lives in Weston-super-Mare, and a sister, Kathleen, who lives in Magherafelt, Northern Ireland. I had three parents. Most people have two, but I had three. There was my mother, Marjorie, Murdo, and old Granny was the third parent. My mother came, my mother was English, and she was born in Uddingston in Middlesex. And her father was in the Met Office, and he was posted to Stornoway. He was supposed to go to the Azores, but seeing they had twins at 18 months old, they were posted to Stornoway instead. And my father was working at the airport, and that's where they met. And then shortly after that, the Clark family moved to Shetland, and my mother stayed behind and married my father. Effie, fit. So, for a short time, I was a teacher, believe it or not. I was a weaver, and then an engineer. And in 14th of September 1973, I married Effie. I'll go into that a bit later on. So I went to back school and Mr. Nicholson, you know, they chose, was it 4 or 5, to go to the Nicholson, the 11 plus it was called then. And I think the 4 that went was Rollo, who's here, Kingy, Maretta from Uppercall, and Peter Tack. And then we went to the castle shortly after that. The castle was really good because in the castle you did block work, you did joiner work, you did, you know, a variety of things. It was a really good broad grasp of everything. But my mother bought me some, you know, like a saw on a plane. I was really keen on wood. So I went to the castle to be a joiner. And when we went up there on the inauguration day, they said, your grades are far too good, you're going to be an engineer. So they put me onto the engineering class. No discussion, no nothing. So that's how I became an engineer. And then as part of the apprentice, I got an apprenticeship then with a hydro in 1970. And the first year of that was full-time in Inverness, and then 3-month block releases after that. And I sat my driving test in Inverness. But anyway, when we went to the tech college, we were shown this wonderful workshop with all the latest milling machines, lathes, way ahead of what was in the castle. And I thought this was absolutely amazing. So we did 1 or 2 weeks, and you know, we didn't get to the machine shop at all. So I asked the teacher, I said, so when do we get to the machine shop? Oh, you don't. She said, you're on an ONC course leading to HNC, and it's all like a bit academic. So I said, well, I wanted to go to the machine shop. So they said, but you'll have to degrade yourself to a City and Guilds course. Well, I said, that's what I want to do. So I took myself off the HNC one, and they put me onto the City and Guilds and did all the machinery, and it was all wonderful. I didn't really see how you could be an engineer without ever seeing a machine shop. It's like learning to ride a bike without actually ever being on one. So I was in Inverness then at the Milburn Hostel, and there was a social there, and Effie was at this social. Effie was in Inverness. She was a cook, a trainee cook in the Portree Hospital. And she was doing a course in Inverness, and she was living with relatives in Inverness. And at the end of the social, I asked her if I could walk her home, like dead romantic. However, I didn't ask her where she stayed, so it was actually out on Culduthel Road, and from the Milburn Hospital it's well over a mile walk. So I walked her out there and asked if I could see her again. And, you know, she said yes. So on the second, we'd made a time, and I went out and walked all the way to Culduthel Road and was waiting for her to come out, and she wasn't coming out, not coming out. And eventually, Katrina Mowat, as she is nowadays, lives in Stornoway. She was in the same accommodation, and she came out and she said, she'll be out in 5 minutes. And little did I know that Effie was refusing point blank to come out. This was Katrina trying to talk her into it. It took quite a while.
I've never forgiven her.
Eh?
I've never forgiven her.
So imagine how my life would have been if Katrina had come out and said, she's not coming, I'll come instead. So, courting, we were then courting in Inverness. We didn't have a car, you had to walk all the way out there, and we met, and it was like December, and if it was a very cush night, we obviously had to find shelter, so we used to find the nearest bus stop and sat in the bus stop for our dates, chatting away. and then walking all the way back. So it was, when we came home then, we both came from very humble backgrounds actually.
But you knew how to treat a lady.
She stuck with it, shall I say. When we came home, it was all done with kiosks. I had the phone, we had to make a time, say 9 o'clock Sunday night. She would, if her brother was around with a car, would drive her, and I would then have to be at the phone box. And if you missed, it was really hard going, because if you missed your phone call, then you had to write each other and say, okay, when's the next, rendezvous for the phone? So the quoting was, pretty skimpy really. We didn't see much of each other. Amazing, yeah. And then we ended up getting married, and we bought a caravan between us, which cost £200 in Uig in Skye, and we had our brother put it on the ferry, and we did it up beautifully, and we were living in the caravan, behind my parents' house. Now, I don't know if anybody in here has ever wintered in a caravan. Oh, I had it tied down and braced like nothing on earth, and in a storm, it's like ornaments flying, dishes, everything. So one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, we had to go on my parents' house. Hey, can we come in? This thing's going to blow away. So we were kind of looking for somewhere else to go. But anyway, the caravan, when we finished with it, ended up the Peel's tea room. It used to go around all the sites, as their mobile tea room, sofa cabins they use nowadays. So the house at 54 Vatterskir came up for rent, and it was owned by a Stephen Hoyle who worked for the Hydro. I'm sure Malcolm will remember him. And we were renting the house off him, and we were quite happy there. The house was atrocious really. It was water dripping everywhere and buckets, and I'd be sitting at the telly and, oh, there's another new one. It wasn't going to blow away. I still remember it was poorly built. I had this brainwave of tarring it. It was tar that was on the roof, an asbestos roof. That was up there. Oh, they see tarring away. And came down after I finished, and honest to God, the wall couldn't have been anything like vertical. So all the tar was running off the roof onto the wall. The wall was absolutely black as well. But we were really happy there actually. So then I went to the power station, and I was the first apprentice, I think, that SSE took on at the power station. And the power station then was full of ex-seamen, and I don't think they really knew what to do with an apprentice, and I was just kind of wandering around aimlessly. But Murray's were in there then. They were installing new generators, number 7, number 8, and they were far more receptive to this newfangled apprentice. And there was a guy, Bob Lindsay from Aberdeen, who was absolutely outstanding engineer, and he took the time to teach and learn and everything. And that was all well and good until a certain employee started with the Hydro. Then you started at 8:30 in the morning, and the peak load was at like 20 to 10, and you had an hour for lunch, and then the finish time was 5:30. And the peak load was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and SSE liked that because everybody was on site during the peak loads, because there was no Agreco then. Agreco hadn't been born. You had to get by with whatever was in the power station. And if you had, I hope this doesn't bore you, if they had lost an engine in the winter and they didn't have enough to supply everybody, they used to reduce the voltage, because that makes the power go further. And then they had a sequence of shutting bits of the island off to reduce the load so that they could get by with less engines till they got the engine back again. And it was dreadfully unfair, because they had a hierarchy of which breakers to trip, and the hardest one was always the first. then West Side. It was never the town and the hospital and the airport. So that's how everybody of my generation, they were really good at making toast on the fire with a fork, because being in the dark was quite common. Wasn't it, Marco? Anyway, this new fellow started, and he couldn't see why this hourly regime should be in place. He thought we should start at 8, have half hour for lunch, and finish at 4:30. And SSE were not for that system at all, but under the previous system, the engine was shut off and allowed to cool for 8 hours. I mean, these engines are absolutely rusty. You know, they're 500-degree exhausts. It was all very civilized. It would be off for 8 hours if it could, and then you worked on it and sorted it and what have you. But SSE agreed to this 8 to 4:30 with nobody on the site during the peak load, provided everybody agreed to work on hot engines. In other words, if the engine's switched off, you go straight up onto it, and I mean, you couldn't touch any. They were working with rags, absolutely soaking wet. So I came home, one night. I used to get the pay packet, like a normal pay packet then, and I came home with my pay absolutely soaking, and with Effie, laying all these notes out on the heater to dry them. And I just said to him, I cannot be doing this for the rest of my life. So we were looking for ways out. Anyway, while we're on the pay packet thing, what really amazed me is everybody was getting a pay packet in the mess room, and amazing the number of guys who took the money out of the packet, put it in their pocket, tore up the packet. She's not seeing that, because what you got paid was written on the packet. I always thought the money was kind of half and half. Well, half and half, was it, Effie?
You wouldn't dare.
So we were looking for a way out of this, or I was, and my mother was then doing the pottery. So, the only way we could see out of this, because it was awful, was to join my mother in the pottery. So I tendered my notice with SSE, to go to a pottery. And one of the last jobs I did before I left was the number 9 generator had a fault, and we had to strip it all the way down to the floor, to the studs. And the boss then, Colin Dan and Big Al, cornered me in the injection room in the power station, and they said, will you come back and rebuild number 9 engine for us as a contractor? The same rates as Murray's. And, that was that's where GDS was born, actually, in that room. And, with that conversation. So then we did that. That took about 3 months, and I got paid £4,406 for that job, which is pretty much the price of a house now and then. And I went to the station boss. They used to send their fuel injection equipment to Glasgow to get done, and I asked him if I bought the stuff to do the fuel injection equipment, would they consider doing it locally? And they did. He said absolutely. So then we went and bought a prefab building down in Manchester. They were dismantling it. Heb Haulage went for it and brought it, and that's the old workshop in Colin, and that's where we started the fuel injection equipment. But in the meantime, we'd done a lot of rebuilds with Murray's, and I had, and were quite. So then SSE started asking if I would go to Lochcarnan to do similar work down there. And now bear in mind, Effie was in Bathurst then with the 3 kids on her own, no car, marooned, solitary confinement, and she wasn't that keen on the idea. Anyway, we did go there. And then Murray's wanted me to go to Somalia to do similar work, and Effie says, no, that's not going to happen. And then the Isle of Man government was running at the same engines in the Isle of Man, and they were wanting me to go there as well, but it just didn't seem fair on Effie, so I didn't go there either. So it was between Lochcarnan and Stornoway. So then there was word of the cable from the mainland coming, and all this SSE work would stop. And I still remember coming down in the power station, the boss came to me and he says, "Your wife's from Skye, isn't she?" And I said, "Yes." "Well, that cable's coming through Skye. Do they own any ground that they can hold up that cable for months fighting over?" And they didn't. So they were trying to stop it. Then we were looking at alternatives. So the site that the filling station's on now came up, and we bought it off George Stewart. The site originally got off the trust and was owned by Back Stornoway Transport Limited. And Back Stornoway Transport Limited, when the buses started in earnest, there was a crowd of them, the Peel, Shirashoy, and they created the Back Stornoway Transport Limited. And will I show you something? This thing. So, Back Stornoway Transport Limited, they bought. This is the big shed that was at the filling station. I'll show you the map in a minute. But it started life at Rhode Island as a big hangar where they were servicing the seaplanes that were, doing the U-boat searches in the Atlantic. And Back Stornoway Transport bought it and put it. It was here. And if you think these are the pumps just now, and this is the shop and the post office, and that's the footprint of the shed, the hangar. And the buses used to go in the front there, and it's an enormous shed and drive round. And the pit is still under this building here. In fact, when we were doing groceries there, we used to keep the lemonade down in the pit because there was probably still lemonade. And then there was a little shed here, and when we went to this, remember Sandy used to make the blocks? We had a shed in the middle here, and the pump, and he used to come down. Always used to see him, if he saw you, he would start his walk down, and you would see him throw the fag down and walk down. And if you wanted paraffin, the paraffin was in this wee shed here. But when we dismantled this little shed, it had headed paper for Back Stornoway Transport in it. And it had Back Stornoway Transport Limited, phone 1, back 1, back 1. One of my biggest regrets is that, and I'm sure I kept some of them, but I can't find them now. So then, it started off at Cuddy Point, and then it was built at Back. This is the only picture we have of it at Back. I don't think it ever had doors. I mean, buses and everything could walk. It's a huge shed. And I used to walk past there going to school, and there must have been thousands of starlings in there because the noise of birds, because it didn't have a door. So then, when Back Stornoway Transport ceased trading, or they were taken over by Mitchell's garage, Mitchell then dismantled the shed and he erected it as his showroom. That's the same shed there. But Mitchell then had a big dispute with the council because he was being charged rates for it, and he was asking, well, how do I stop you charging me rates? Well, if you take the roof off. So he took the roof off. So that's the story of the shed. Some of the guys outside. That bit of wall there was actually there when I started over there. How am I doing that?
Very well.
Come on.
Go with all.
So the hangar story. And then the pumps. Yeah, we bought the piece of ground. The piece of ground actually went from the main road to the top road. And then the council came after us and said they wanted the top bit, for the care unit. You never had anything taken off you and they came and they said, we'll give you 400 quid for it. And I said, that wouldn't even pay the legal fees for me buying it. And off they went again. That was the McKim fellow, and he came back and he says, we'll give you 4,500, and if you don't accept it, we'll give you the agricultural valuation of it, which will be a few £100. Take it or leave it. So the council took the, the top bit and built the care home. I thought they were pretty ruthless actually, but anyway. So the old pump there were two filling stations back in the day in back. There was Sandy's one, where it is today, and there was another one at what we used to call the Red Shed, it's the black house now. The tank is probably still there for that one. So Dolchini took the old pump and tank, and that was in the current one, up to his garage, and he had it for a while, but I think he gave it up, and we were then going to set up tanks down there. And if you remember, Mark, the Peels took 2 tanks away from the power station, the daily service tanks on the annex, and these 2 tanks were then down at, the Peels had a yard just past the Cold River on the right hand side, way back from the road, and they were making blocks down there, and these 2 tanks were stored there. Do you remember that, Angus? Yes. And I asked them for the tanks and probably got them for nothing off them. So we then, put the tanks over and opened the filling station in 1984. And Veal's wife was the first customer. So then, we were going to do the garage over there, and what was Beaton's garage at the back, that building actually came from over in Shawbust. It was at, where the Harris Street Mill is, it was at the road end there, and you can still see the concrete plinth there, and Seaforth Builders advertised it in the Gazette as for sale, the building. So I asked him how much he wanted for it, and he says, absolutely nothing, take it away, because he'd been paid to take it away. So, we dismantled the building. No cordless tools then, boy, you had to go, this house was a good few hundred yards away. Any chance we could get a plug? Because you had to grind, it was corrugated iron that was on it, and you had to grind the head off every single one of them, which was quite painstaking. So that's how the garage arrived there. And then the post office, we took over in 1989, and I still remember when we bought the post office, under the counter, Molly had written that he'd taken it over in 1969. So Molly was in the post office for 20 years. But I've got little notes here about the post office. Right. The post office started with, John Murray, where the old post office used to be. And Mrs. Murray, John Murray died. It's John Murray who's standing in front of the building there, actually, one of them. And Mrs. Murray kept the house, but she sold the shop. Now, I'm assuming Molly was working for them in the shop doing the post office. But she sold the shop bit to Jackson. Remember Jackson? He was living in Crest for a while, and he had vans. In fact, my mother was working for them in the shop. And Molly must have been the postmaster, and he took the shop then, and it was in Type Morelli for long enough. And this is where you come in, Martin. Where is he? Martin Smith. Aye. The post office was in your house then for quite a while. You went in the front door, and the post office was to the right. That Molly was operating it from there for quite a while until he built the existing post office. So there you are. You're famous. You know where he lives? Is it Talgunit? Morelli's the next one out after Talgunit. So Molly built the new post office and shop, and he extended it several times over the period. And then Helen Beaton's been there ever since.
Which house was Jackson in place?
It was built. house that Courtney and Alison
Okay.
bought. It was entirely the asset first in the old house, but then he built.
Where the foxes are today.
Well, they've built stuff on that.
Now, the Stornoway Plastics started in a strange way as well. The Gale Force used to injection mould all their own rings and stuff for their cradles, and they were having all sorts of problems with the machine. And I used to go over and fix the machine, and then that progressed to, I think the guy who was operating the moulder left, and I used to go over and mould the product for them in there. And then Stuart Graham in the end came and said, look, just take or buy the machine off me and the moulds, and he said, we'll buy the plastic products off you, which is what we did. And then we bought the building on Rakes Road, which used to be part of the workshop for seafood builders, and then Island Creels were there for a while. We actually bought it off the bank because Island Creels had gone into administration. So the reason we bought Rakes Road initially was to make, myself and Robert were going to start making signs, like vehicle signs and plastic signs. But at the same time, Matthew started doing it in Out End, and we were thinking, well, we can't be seen to be doing this, in competition with somebody who's starting off from fresh. So Riddle came in one day and he said, can you do brake discs? And because we bought them older, we were going to be bought the equipment to make our own moulds. So we went to auctions at Doonray, we bought milling machines, we went to auctions at Rosyth. We were very brave. There was a guy at the it's in Edinburgh, but Glaswegians are amazing. This guy, he was asking, where are you from? Hebrides. The Hebrides, are you really? And he was saying, the electricity, he was saying, you need electric for these things to work. Do you? And I said, how do you get that then? Do you buy it in buckets or what? So we bought all these, and then Riddle came in and asked if we could do brake discs, which you can, and gradually, the engineering side of it built up with just people coming in. While I was running the garage down at Cull, it was a very stop-start thing, because SSE would say, well, will you go to US to do a machine? That was like 4 months, and you had to drop all your customers in a one-hour, and then go and do that, because it wasn't. Then of course you came back and you were trying to start the garage up again, and people don't like, the stop-start thing, so we gave up the garage. And Buddy Beaton was cycling past one evening at the filling station, and we just got chatting, and I said, what about went in the garage? And he did. And he was there a long time. And then he sublet half of it to John Nicholson, who was doing the body repairs there. So, if I go back to my mother was probably the biggest influence on my life by a country mile. She was born in Uxbridge in Middlesex. She was working at the airport, and she was one of only 2 English people in the whole of Back at that time. And one was herself, and the other one was Ian Bailey's father. And I think the third English person that appeared in Back was Samson's wife in the Swedish Houses, Violet. So they were very rare compared to today. She was really, really artistic, and drawing things. There's a book, did I bring it? Maybe not. So Sundays when I was young, you weren't allowed out on Sunday except when they were in church, because you wouldn't, anybody who was of anybody, if you went out when they were in church, then nobody was going to see you that was of any importance. So a lot of the time was spent inside, and my mother, we used to say to her, now throw a cow. She was amazing, she would throw a perfect cow. Another part of the entertainment with my mother was, kids are cruel, Gaelic. She was absolutely understood every word of Gaelic and she spoke English. My mother, Granny spoke Gaelic, and we used to say to her, say this in Gaelic, and it was a real, entertainment. But she took to craft life amazingly. She had the cow, crops. They talk about food miles today. I mean, our family used to, my father along with his brother used to plant 7 bags of potatoes between them. There's a mountain of potatoes. And then they used to salt a barrel of herring and every year. And the standard lunch was herring and salt herring and potatoes. With a glass of milk, your own milk. I mean, there was no mileage in your food at all. And you'd have soup on Sunday, and the tea, because my father worked on the boat, was boiled fish and potato. And, there was no such thing as, enjoying food. If somebody said to you after you stood up from your salt herring, did you enjoy that? It's like, huh? Food was something you did, you ate. It wasn't a social, I don't know how it's become such a pleasure thing. If you're not enjoying it, it's like, huh? Funny, it was the same thing day after day after day. But my mother was absolutely outrageous, because on Sunday night she used to buy these packets of chow mein, and these noodles that you fry and they froth out. That was the Sunday night treat, and cheesy pasta. That was probably her way of staying sane through it all. She always used to say, I married a duur yoso. But most of our time then was spent on the shore, because there was loads of boats. There was 2 or 3 boats in Cull, there was 2 or 3 boats in Breivik, and going to meet the boat was amazing. And they used to have 20, 30 boxes of haddock each a day, and all that was consumed on the island. Fish was you had your salt herring and your boiled fish, and that was about it. And then all the scraps, the only ones they could sell were, haddock, and they used to sell, throw the white in cronutans, all the rubbish. And everybody had a piece of string in their pocket for the gat, and you used to go home with your gat and got brownie points. Everybody used to be on the Cruggoch for cuddies. My mother would never allow me to go to the Cruggoch on my own, but the Tainkelf next door, he was really keen. Everybody was on the Cruggoch. You used to go down Cuddiff, and there'd be 10 people there with their rods, and we used to eat. Anyway, I used to, straight from school, in with my bag, straight over to the Tainkelfs and ask her, well, the Cruggoch, and then straight down to the buyer, get your wee bucket, salt herring in it, good for bait actually, for cuddies, roll and then way down with the tiger, and it was amazing. She also taught me a very important rule in life, and 2 rules. My mother always said, whatever you do in life to help somebody, life will repay you 10%. And, that's why we never saw, you give somebody a leg up, it's not that person is going to do it for you, but, life will repay you. It was a really good thing. And she always used to say, now tell the truth. It'll be really unpalatable at the time, but believe me, long term it's a better solution. Yeah. And she was one of these people you could ask endless questions. She was a mass of information. I remember out in the peats, lifting the peats one day, and like that, question after question after question, and my father working away, and he just said, no, na scushuvri, you're rubbish.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, sir.
How did this person, artistic, you know, obviously quite cultured. How did she meet Abdul Joseph and end up with it?
Well, they were both at the airport, and I'm sure my father would have been very charming, you know, like, like myself.
Sure.
Yeah. So then she started making figurines, but you know, she was only, I don't know what kind of clay she had. She was only doing it in the oven, and you know, that seemed to sort of take off.
In the kitchen oven?
In the kitchen oven. It was you know, like, but they weren't like proper clay. So then she was going to buy a kiln, and we ordered the kiln and everything, and I was due to go away to Inverness, and we knew the kiln was on the Loch and Vegan. You know, everything used to come loose then, and we went up to the Loch and Vegan. Wasn't it amazing how people try to help each other then? And we explained to the docker, you know, I said, I'm supposed to be going away tomorrow, and this kiln, I would really love to get it wired up for my mother. And the guy said, you'll come with me straight into the hold, and he said, you find that thing and I'll get it out for you. And, you know, we found the wooden crate, you know, under, and they cleared everything, took this out, and we got the kiln wired up before I went away. But pottery is fiendishly difficult thing, actually, because, you know, when you make the model, it's got to be dried out, and then it does what's called a biscuit firing, and you know, that makes it into like a solid object. But if it hasn't been dried out properly, the water left in it becomes steam and explodes. So you can, you know, go to the kiln and it's like just gravel, you know, like weeks of work. And then you paint it. Vivian painted thousands of models. She was really a painter. And then you have to glaze it. And the glaze is actually, you know, like powdered glass that you dip it in. So you end up with this powder of glass on the model, and it goes into the kiln. And you have to be very careful about cleaning. Make sure there's no glass between the model and the shelf, because it just sticks. And if the temperature is too high, the glaze runs, and your models are welded solid to the shelf. And if it's too low, the glaze is a milky colour and it's not clear. So it's loads of frustrations and seconds. And
so where
really
did you
difficult.
learn all of the science behind this?
Oh, the internet, no.
I was just going to say there was no internet.
There was no, just probably books and library. And she was always at the library with her load of books, you know, the mobile library. She also made an Indian village. She was really interested in the Red Indians. There was quite a big scene of a Red Indian village with wigwams and everything to do with Indians. Really nice, very authentic. And she was proposing to do the same for island life, because scenes like round the boats when they came in at the shore and the priests and all that. But she never got round to doing that.
Why the Indians? Was there any specific link with that?
I don't know. What was her obsession with Indians? Just her thing. And then she kind of went in with Barry Edwards in the pottery, but they were just what they call slip casting the models. They weren't actually. Every one of my mothers was made, individually by hand, but they were being slip cast. Now she was an amazing woman, because we heard then that Culminar was selling a motorbike for a £5, and I went to my mother and I said, could I buy the motorbike? And she said yes. So we bought this motorbike for a £5, a HIS 350, huge the thing, really heavy. And so heavy actually, if we could actually, I'll tell you a funny story. We didn't have money for petrol. We weren't that well off. But my mother used to buy a barrel of paraffin for the heater. She had paraffin heater all over the house. And we figured out that if you emptied the Amel carburetor bowl and filled it with petrol and the paraffin in the tank, and as long as you kept the revs up, it would run all day on paraffin. So she couldn't figure out how the paraffin consumption had gone through the roof. but a really heavy thing. We could go from the house down the crofts, across the river, all the way up to town on the beach, and back. But woe betide, if it fell over on you anywhere, you couldn't stand it up again. You had to walk all the way home and get somebody to stand it up with you. Yeah. They are happy. Granny, my third parent, Granny was she was a battle axe, but I mean she wasn't bad to us. She wasn't bad to us at all, but she always made us have uha de volder, like a beaten egg in the morning. Every morning you had to, and have you ever tried drinking one of them? It's like, some of it swallows and some doesn't. Come on, grim. Then you had to have a spoonful of olive oil after that. So can you imagine turning up in school and burping all this, not really concentrating much on your life, So, but I mean, she made my father do it as well. There's no nonsense. It wasn't just the kids. My father could do it with just break the egg in a cup, splash on milk, and marijuana, without the drinking bit of it. Anyway, her room upstairs was like a sanctum, that she was living. Oh, I'll tell you another thing as well. She never actually sat at the table with us, and she always used to take her stuff into the living room. I don't know whether that was out of respect for, the family eating together or whatever. And she never put butter on her piece on a surface. It was always in her hand. She'd be doing the butter like that in her hand. Strange. I've never tried. Anyway, her bedroom, her mattress was straw, which, we used to say, how clear she was. How she slept and that thing, I don't know. And on Sunday, we used to be up playing, and her favourite saying was, fly at the Hasinawa. Very calm screamer. And we used to be playing upstairs, bouncing on the beds and everything, and Granny used to much creep up on us. But what she didn't realise was that on the wooden banister, you could hear a ring click, 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 as she came up the stair. So we used to shoot under the bed, and wait there, and you could see her feet, back and forth for ages till she went away again.
Tom and Jerry.
And she used to get up at all hours, for washing. And, she would have the washing out at, 5, 6 in the morning, as if she seemed to be in competition with somebody about getting the washing out first. We could never figure out who it was that she was competing with, but she was, yeah. Oh. And then her husband, Dushak Big, he went to America, and she'd never heard a word from him for 8 years. But nothing, dicky bird. Imagine that today, there'd be a new husband, more kids, everything.
How many kids did you have at this stage?
Just the 2. Right. Anyway, he came back then. But he must have been a bit of a character, because apparently he was in the garden planting something, and the minister walked past. And the minister said, "Na mission crew here, Hanasa Kalkan, how Kurushin." And he said to, "Shouldn't you for a Hatter Hates and crew here?"
Translate, so there's a few people that probably didn't.
Oh, is there? He was planting things in the garden, and the minister came past, and the minister said, "If I was God, none of that would grow." And he just turned round and said, "That's the difference between you and God." And then my granny, one day, I must have been the only person in the house. I must have been tiny. And she asked me to go to the shop for salsa. How am I going to use my salsa? Salsa, and I didn't know what salsa was. Anyway, she put a pile of coins in my hand. Just $5, can we go to your salsa? So I went into the post office. Must have been a high counter then, because I said, "I'm a granny Guri salsa." And I launched this handful of coins over the counter. And I don't know who was selling, but boy, they sure knew what I was after. I got a tin of Andrew's liver salts and salts. She must have been dying with heartburn. Sent me to the shop for salt salts. And another thing about, when the water came, she didn't like the water from the tap at all. It was, I remember, you used to have a bath, and it was like having a bath in tea, the water in the tap. So you had to go to the well, and you came back from school at Halagan Topeth, and because she would only use the well water for cooking and drinking. And you go with two big, these big white enamel buckets. And I don't know if you ever tried keeping 2 full buckets of water away from your legs. Really, really good. But there was a wooden frame. Was it a kerkel it's called?
Yes.
So you went, without the kerkel, you see, it was banging your knees all the time and filling your wellies. Very uncomfortable. But I remember in the well, strangely enough, these little black beetles that used to run on the water. Used to fascinate me. Yes. Anyway, that's Granny.
What about the gold mines?
Oh yes, he, when he, I remember seeing loads of, shares in gold mines in Canada and America that Christian Buck must have been buying. But that was during the gold rush, and probably these certificates, we tried to see if they were worth anything, but they weren't really. I think shares in gold mines were like confetti, so, yeah.
You don't have any of them left?
No, I don't. And I still remember the Nabob gold mine, and there was loads. I know, that would have been... So, Effie, we come on to Effie.
I think a few words about his father first.
Oh, right, okay.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, I see.
We'll leave the best till last.
I don't know if I have my...
Should I?
Oh, I have. My father was at the whaling in South Georgia, and he always used to say, "I have stood on Shackleton's grave." And if you ever said, half hour you, half hour in South Georgia. He worked at the pier at number 1, and then he worked at the airport where he met my mother. And for quite a few years he suffered from depression. But he and I had a really bad accident actually, because he was going to take me to a football match at Abercrombie, and the other 2 kids were creating because, Kathleen and Bonnie, because they weren't getting, and he was going to take me on a crossbar to the football match at Abercrombie. And my mother had to take the other 2 down the croft with their head past. So coming down past Tuckishan's house, my leg went into the wheel, and there was a big accident, and I managed to get my leg out of the bike, and I knew my mother was down the croft, so I just legged it. But he had a really bad, head injury, and I reckon that might have been, contributing towards his depression. But then he was weaving latterly, and then he was crewing for Tara Maclennan in the boat at Breivik, and hence the fish. And then I don't know if you remember, for bait, there's a limit to how much bait you can take off the shore down there. The Murach and the Fiascan, and they used to hire them on this lorry, and then they would go to gather mussels down in Harris or wherever, and bring them all back in bags. And if you go along the foreshore from Porthcurl to Breivik, you'll see little like rings of boulders where they used to put all these mussels, and put a net over them, and that's how they kept the bait alive, while they were fishing. But then if you the Taikov just now, his wife wouldn't let him bait the small line in the house. It was in the byre, and then there was this. Ours used to be done in the kitchen, and it used to be smooth. He's not allowed to do it in the house. It's a pretty grim process, actually. But I mean, he was hard-working, weaving, and what's about next? Effie.
Yes, you can go on to it.
Can I? Anyway, Gordon Diesels then, we did work in loads of power. We were in Kirkwall Power Station, in Beaumore, in Islay, in Barra, in Lochcarnan, Tyree. Tyree is an amazing place, actually. Tyree is the sunniest place in Britain. And Tyree is so low that, you know, the damp Atlantic air comes in and it doesn't see Tyree. Tyree is basically one big sand dune with a bit of a rock at each end. And it gets more sunshine hours than anywhere in the UK. And there's 8 cattle to every person in Tyree. And there is no rabbits because it's sand dunes, it's just hares. And there is not one street light on Tyree. Yeah. And the hotels in Tyree are pretty dire. Effie, came from the health a little. There's an interesting story about the little village Effie came from. Maybe I should explain. This is it's a little village of 3 houses, and it's here in Skye. But the village of Lehealth is really famous for this loch out here, because they used to have diatomite in that loch. Now, if I explain to you, Alfred Nobel, of Nobel Peace Prize, and nitroglycerine was a liquid explosive and very, very unstable. I mean, you just give it a knock and poof, and it was killing more people using it than, it was really unsafe. So Nobel was Swedish, and he killed either his father or his brother with an explosive, and the Swedes chased him away. They said, far too dangerous an individual to have in Sweden. So he came to London and looking for somebody to operate, and they wouldn't give it. So he eventually ended up in Scotland, and the Scots gave him a piece of ground down in Ayrshire where he was doing his explosives, and the explosives that actually became ICI's explosives factory, the biggest explosives factory in the world. But Nobel diatomite is absolutely microscopic plankton that they've got a little shell and they die and they fall to the bottom of a loch. And that loch at Cuier is full of this diatomite. And it's like white chalk, very, very absorbent. And if you try it, you'd swear it was just blackboard chalk. But it's not like peat, it's like blackboard chalk. If you wet it again, it absorbs it. So they were trying, Nobel's invention was to put nitroglycerine into diatomite. And then it became stable, and you just wrap it in paper. And you couldn't really set it off with a knock. So it became, that was his invention in life. And then he made big, big money out of that, and that's where the Nobel Peace Prize came from, because he was pretty pissed off. He didn't want it used for killing people. And of course, as soon as they got he called it dynamite. As soon as they got dynamite, people started killing themselves. I was pretty upset about it. But anyway, to give you an idea of how precious this was, that loch is full of diatomite, and in the 1800s, they built a railway all the way out. This is about 3 miles out onto the moor to this loch, where they were digging the diatomite. And then this was a gravity railway all the way down to the shore here, and they had sheds on the shore here where they were drying it. And then this is the remains on the shore of the shed. And then there was a pier out, you could see the remnants of a pier where these ships were. This is in the 1800s. Can you imagine how expensive it was? And then these are some aerial shots of the road, and this was the railway. And the because the railway was gravity, I think they were being pulled out by horses, but everybody, when I went to Skye, they had these tremendous stories. You know, these bogies were going past, and if you got onto the bogie, it's like a roller coaster all the way down to the shore. And then in the 1950s, it was the railway they were using in the 1800s, but then in 1950 it started up again and they put a road in. The lots way out here. And they started then taking the diatomite weight, believe it or not, in lorries from Gerhardt all the way to Uig and Skye. And you know this terminal building of Karl Marx here? There's two of these sheds. These sheds is where they were drying the diatomite. It wasn't Karl Marx at all. And Ali just told me earlier, the frontage around, but these are actually porter cabins that they sunk into the wall. And I think the pier at Uig was actually built for the diatomite as well. But if you say, imagine these lorries pouring, this slurry pouring out the back of the white, the roads were white. And then on a dry day, there's clouds of dust. You could see where the lorry was just by the amount of dust. Anyway, it didn't work very well. Anyway, that's the story. I thought it was a really good story. Effie's an amazing influence behind the scenes on the family. I mean, she's like a big clocking hen that keeps everything together. She's very good at it. She does. I remember her telling me a story that Ben Moley told her a long time ago about the embers in a fire. If a fire starts going out, you just bring all the embers together. So Effie's really good at keeping the family together and giving everybody guidance. She's amazingly tolerant because she put up with me all that time. Oh, she should be getting a Victoria Cross. And she was very industrious throughout the process. She was painting models for my mother, going across with kids on her back. She was knitting jumpers. You know, Harris Tweed, there was a lot of spare wool, and she had her. She was selling jumpers to Mrs. McKeever in Bay Head and what's the woman in Skye? Tippecanoe shop in Portree. And she was working in her shop, as you all know. She does a lot behind the scenes, and she'll be really annoyed that I say this. If anybody's in hospital in the village, she sends them a get well card, you know, just to give them a bit of a leg up. If there's a death in the village, she generally sends out like a food hamper because she knows that the last thing on their minds are going to, you know, she tins of soup and things that they can get going with. And she doesn't like wasting food. I always have to say to her, will I put this in the fridge for another couple of days to make you feel better? She gathers all the, you know, the out of dates in the shop and freezes them and gives them out to the needy. And she's really an amazing lady, actually. An amazing family. I mean, we never have a crossword. I've never, all the kids actually, there's no nastiness. But one thing she's really, really good at is imitating voices. Not many people know that.
Do you do a Harris accent?
If there's somebody in the shop and, you know the guy, so and so on. If you're having difficulty knowing who it is, she does the talk. Oh, yes, I know him.
Do a Harris accent, I'm saying.
So I think you should get Helen and Effie to do one of these talks.
Yeah.
Helen in the shop.
Why not?
I'll tell you another thing as well might be of interest to all you commoners. Just about every bit of paper that Gordon Diesel Services has ever received, every invoice, is in storage. Like there's crates of it. When you think back to Akai Seafoods and back to Willie Brown, Zavalik,
All these businesses.
yes, there's documents from all of that which you're more than welcome to have a look at.
Excellent. Oh, well.
So I did some inventions. We'll start with this one. Are you bored, by the way? Are you sure now? This is a tile clip. This is like, the tiles on a roof, and the way tiles come off, and you've got this stupid aluminium clip that they use. So we invented this kind of spring one where they're spring loaded. So we tried selling that to Mari and Redland, and it became apparent that the last thing Mari and Redland want is a clip that stops tiles coming off. It really is, because people change the tiles, when the tiles come off. So they passed me on to a company in Germany. When these two Germans flew over, I sent them this in the post when I came back, and they eventually paid me £17,500 for the patent for that. Now, that was the price of a house then.
What year was this? Roughly.
Early on, long time. I've got the patent for it. And I had to agree not to do anything else on tile clip development for 5 or 10 years. And the thing never appeared. They just, that was it, bought and buried. Then we did a firelighter. The firelighter came into being because somebody burnt a bothy on the moor in Ness. And Ramsay and Peter Gray was the son of Lord Grey, who was in the Tory cabinet. Lord, he was brought up in a castle, and he's a barrister or something. And they had to come up, they were representing this court case over a bothy that was set on fire on Moor in Ness, and they had to walk from, to the bothy. And Peter Gray was living in Edinburgh, and Peter Gray was just looking at all the peat, and he said, I really think you should be able to go into a filling station and buy a thing called a fire, and put it in the hearth, and light it, and sit down. And so Ramsay said, I know the very man who'll look at that for you. So Ramsay said, can you look at a fire? So myself and Robert were looking at, how to make a fire like a fire with coal, but to try and we were doing little mesh things to cover the firelighter and the coal, but to give it a wee shuffle, and it just didn't work. And we were saying, however, the humble firelighter has got mileage. So what we did with a firelighter is, if you look, it's just got 2 holes in it at the top and a vent underneath. So when you light that firelighter and you throw a bucket of coal over it, even if it extinguishes the whole of the outside, it recovers from inside. And because it's got a draft, it's like a little burner, and it's a fantastically effective thing. We were making them, just with ordinary firelighters, and we did one in front of the workshop at Riggs Road out on the concrete, and we went and bought a bag of coal, and we lit the firelighter and bag of coal over it, and recovered, and off the fire went. And we were so chuffed, we went upstairs to have a cup of tea. And then, after a while, we heard this almighty bang. It was on the concrete. This almighty bang. We went down. And the fire had taken, and if concrete gets hot, it's a pretty violent thing. And it had exploded, and there was little embers all across everywhere, all around on the roads, everywhere. So the firelighter then, a mate of Peter Gray's in Edinburgh ran a company called Chartered Brands. And Chartered Brands, what they do is they buy a brand like pomegranate, and they build it up and then sell it on. And so Chartered Brands had a look at this, and they thought this was amazing. It was initially done by a company in Denmark who were making it, but this firm was in Ireland. It went into the supermarkets, but it never actually caught on. The moral of the story is, I thought they made a big mistake by packing them so tightly in a small box, because that's standing beside your normal firelighter packet. It looks like, you know, half the size. Anyway, it didn't work.
It worked, but it didn't sell.
It worked, but it didn't sell. But Charter Brands did market research and they said they've never seen such a positive response. They are amazing. You just write it and but if you're going to... Sorry?
Nisha, are you going to tell us about these things?
Yes, this is a creel hook and we patented this. We've done several patents, you know, with this, the tile clip, a few other things. But this one, you know, there used to be, when you're putting this on the creel, if it's just a single piece of string, you know, the hook goes every direction. So we invented the two holes. We actually made the mold for this and we were molding it. And we patented it, you know, with a string, so you can just pull the string to open the creel. And then this sold really, really well. And then a Chinese company started making it, and there are now, I think, 4 or 5 Chinese companies making an identical copy of that. And we went to the patent agent, you know, and said, we've got a patent on this, and the patent agent said, unless you've got £100,000 to throw at that and expect to lose it, don't bother. So patents aren't worth the paper they're written on, in my experience.
Should?
These are the Highlands and Islands Award for Excellence in Research and Development in 2007. This was to do with, you know, we made a plastic creel. You know, creels, the frames corrode on them, and we made one with plastic panels, so that when your frame corroded, you could take all the panels off and put them onto a new frame, and that didn't work. It was a fabulous product, and you know why it didn't work? Because it was too slippery. The creels, because it's plastic on plastic, it's like beads. And when you're in a rolling sea, you know, your stack of creels on the deck, the creels have to go out exactly as they came in because they're all stuck together in a line. And if one falls off and it's out of sync, you end up with an almighty tangle on the deck. So it didn't work. They're telling you the good and the bad and the ugly. And this had to go to London, I'm not sure which one of these. And you know, the UK fishery officer was there kind of presenting it. So the guy took me aside and says, don't ask me any questions about fishing. That's not, God is my witness, that's what the guy said. And I was like absolutely shocked that you've got the fisheries minister, you know, afraid, you know, can't answer a question about fish. Not that I asked him.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
No, this is something that you probably associate with Gordon.
This is actually, you know, Ian MacDonald in Gress, he took this nut and that's not chromed, that's just polished. And he polished it up just as a trinket and presented me with it. I think it's very cool.
It is indeed. Yeah.
He thinks it's cool too.
Making miracles out of, and I'm not going to repeat the last word, since 1976, so you can read it for yourselves. But yes, it's a great piece of engineering.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you're a very busy man, obviously.
Petrol.
That's what I was going to come to.
Okay.
That was what you're probably best known for is the fuel from, you know, petrol and diesel. So can you give us a bit of background on how you managed to keep the prices?
Yes, the way that happened was when you're selling fuel, the supplier makes you sign a 5-year like contract where you're not allowed to sell any, but you can't just go and buy off somebody else's cheaper. It's a 5-year thing. And the cost of fuel then on this island was on average 13 to 17 pence a litre dearer than Inverness. And it really used to annoy me because I knew that it's the same ship that puts the fuel ashore in Inverness that then comes and puts the fuel ashore in Stornoway. And this 17 pence. And what really annoyed me was they were saying that it's the retailers that are causing this high fuel. And it's not. The retailers make the same margin everywhere. And so the fit how did it all start? It's BP, we were going to change then to Highland Fuels, and Scottish Fuels were not happy about it. And how can if we go back a wee bit, if you join various organisations, Ali will tell you, like Big Oil and all these, you can actually find out how much Scottish Fuels are paying for the fuel. And the reason, I remember the manager locally telling me, you know, the price would come down on the mainland, but not here. And I used to go into him and say, well, how come the price has come down on the mainland and not here? He said, the reason for that is that's the last load we got in, and we can't lower the price until that load is sold. Now, that was a comprehensive lie. No other word for it. Scottish Fuels, you might be surprised, doesn't own any fuel at all, ever. The fuel in the depot at Stornoway is owned by Phillips Conoco. And the price of the fuel in these tanks, when we order, say, 10,000 litres of fuel, Scottish Fuel goes and buys it off Conoco at the going rate that day, you know, the oil price that day, deliver it down to back, put it in our tank, go back up, get the money out of the bank, and they sit there. All they are is custodians, like guards over the place. You can't send your own lorry in, it has to be them. And found it's a bit of a, Ali should really come over and take over on this one.
Not much track, but yeah, you were trying to get out of the alleged contract.
Yes.
And you were adamant that you weren't in a contract, so you kept asking them to show you the contract that you were supposed to have signed. And this was going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then they showed you this one piece of paper with your signature on the bottom. There's no contractual details.
No document. Yeah.
So they maintained you were in contract. So we did get a delivery of Highland Fuels to deliver to us. But then Scottish Fuels phoned, Scottish Fuels phoned Highland Fuels to say that they couldn't deliver anymore because you were still
in contract with them.
In contract. And the way it worked is the rebate, if you remember, the quarterly rebate. We would get half a penny per litre every quarter. And this time they gave us a quarterly rebate, but then they took it back off us within 2 days. So then you called everyone up and you said, if we were in the alleged contract, then you've just broken the contract by taking the rebate back. So they didn't have a leg to stand on then. So they started getting the cheaper fuel.
But they got really nasty about it. I mean, they employed lawyers, you know, and they were saying that they were going to come and take the BP sign away, you know, that if we didn't toe the line. So I took the BP sign down, delivered it up to them and said, there's your sign, it's not yours anyway, it's BP who bought the sign. And then they were alleging that I had gone into their yard and been dangerous and been... Anyway, we went on to Highland Fuels and we could drop the price by 8p straight away. And not a lot of people realise, but we did the calculations back then, Ali, and 13 to 17 pence, I reckon we saved the island, was it 10 million over the first 5 years? Or they were taking vast amounts of money out of it.
Yeah,
Out of the
it
island.
was phenomenal. I mean, we did,
Yes.
well, we don't say we, but you did time it well when you did buy off higher fuels, because the first few weeks we were actually 15 pence a litre cheaper
Yeah.
than the rest of the town, because the price had actually dropped then anyway.
And so many people were following that on Facebook. You know, when they actually backed down in the end, and I put on Facebook that we'd won, it was 28,000 likes.
And I'm sure we're all involved in that, because the reality is, I think we owe you a great debt for the services you provide, and especially for what you've done with the fuel price over the past 15 years and back. It's been phenomenal.
That keeps it going, you know.
So,
But it's actually all of you, because if you don't come and buy it, then we can't be doing what we're doing.
and you see people from all over the island. I regularly see customers from South Harris coming. If they're in Stornoway, they come down. So well done on that one. Now, incredibly busy life. Your pastime, your main hobby.
Effie.
Keeping it happy. Well, I think it's named after another member of the family, the Allison Rose.
The Allison Rose.
A quick word about the Allison Rose.
Allison Rose. We bought a few boats before that, but we thought we would buy a hull and do it from scratch. And it's a lot of work. And me and Robbie were on that for a year and a half, every night, every Saturday. But it's a really, really good boat. My hobby will go out up north of the Burt, and you'll have to come with us. Good fishing.
With my spew bag.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. It is a beautiful boat, and I've often admired it. It's a really great job you've made of it. There's one thing though about you that really, really puzzles me, and it's this. It's not that you've lost your finger, but how did you not make a prosthetic, given all the plastic and the steel? Tell them the story of how you lost that.
I'm not. Effie says I'm not to tell the real story. I'll tell you how it happened then. You know, Angus Modo, Tweety, we just finished work in the old workshop, and I was sitting on the front wheel of the tractor, and he was sitting in the driver's seat, and I'm always working up my hands, and for whatever reason or whatever we were talking about, I checked, you know, the massive 4-cylinder's got a big fat belt on it and a really sharp pulley. I tried the fan belt to see if it was tight. The second he flicked the switch and the engine just lurched, you know, and the finger was kind of hanging on by a thread. So we threw the big rag over it, and off we went up to the hospital and walked into reception and said, I've just cut my finger off. And the woman said, keep that rag on your hand and go straight down the corridor and take the second left. It's funny. But they said they could put it back on again, but they said it would be rigid and numb, and he said it would be like working with a pencil in your hand. But it's got some really good uses, because if I tell you that I'm a magician, see a wee child comes in and you say, I'm a magician, you know, and they look at you and they go, aye, okay. I said, I bet you can't do this. And the child goes down, and I bet you can't do this either. So it's pretty useful, actually.
My grandfather used to do that with his glass eye. He used to go like that and then hit the back of his head and it would jump forward. And he would come down from the back room in the morning when we were kids, and we'd be sitting in the kitchen and the hand would appear with the eye and he'd say, I see what you're wearing today, or so we thought the glass eye was like your finger. Yeah. So, right, that almost brings things to our conclusion. Questions? When you said you could talk, I didn't realise quite how much. But I decided to let it flow because it was going so well. So, you will get to tea. It's been great. It's been absolutely perfect from my perspective, having so little to do. Any questions that we haven't picked up on? Anybody got anything that they want to ask?
Gordon, what are you going to do when you retire?
Well, I'm only 47 yet, you know. I dye my hair this colour. Well, I'm absolutely incredibly blessed in that my work's my hobby, and I've spent my life, you know, doing my hobby. And I'm way past retiring now. I'm 70. 70 what? 72. So until such time as the kids say, I think you should go home.
Very lucky indeed.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Were you going to say something about it?
Yeah, the time you were in the castle, a teacher in the castle for a while, were you?
Yes.
How do you done there? Or why do you leave?
Well, that, you know, when we built our own house, and when I was doing that, the principal of the castle and another teacher came to see me, and they said, would I go and do teaching? But the people who were teaching it was down at the Inacleach training place. And for some unknown reason, I thought students were wanting to learn things. It's not like that at all. It's got to be force-fed, he'll tell you. And the students that were there were, you know, they seemed to be sort of doing an extra year for little or no apparent reason, and they were totally disinterested. I hated it. I hate getting dressed up in the morning and all that. Anyway, I left that, and I still remember one of the teachers when I went to tell them. He said, what are you going to do then? I said, I'm going to start my own business. And he said, well, I hope you still wave to us when you've got your Mercedes.
It's a Citroen Berlingo, just as
sorry?
Your Citroen Berlingo serves a purpose.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, any more questions on the floor?
Yeah.
And then with the pottery with the kiln and you've got to have the temperature right and everything else. You said she was doing it in the kitchen stove?
No, she started off, you can buy a clay that you can fire in a domestic oven, and that's what she was using. But it's not really very strong if you know, it knocks and crumbles. It's not proper pottery. So we had to buy the kiln, you know, to do the proper kind of pottery thing. Yeah.
I just wondered, trying to control the temperature of that.
I know. But she had to buy special clay for it, because if you buy, the clay she was using had like fibres in it, and if you used just ordinary clay, you know, it would all just drop in the kiln. Ask Effie, she's an expert on painting models. Yeah.
Well, Michelle Emma, no more questions. Gleba, we're going to have a cup of tea anyway, so you can ask from the floor. You can catch up with him then. So, as a result of tonight, we've managed to record, you know, the story, which is really good to have. We'd like to do more businesses in the back area, maybe over time.
There's a few of them in here. There's
Yeah,
one there. There's one there. Wait till I see.
But even better as well, the fact that things like the documents that you're talking about are available to the community. The documents, so we certainly take advantage of that. And thanks to Donald for recording it, for Jane, for all the organisation that goes on behind the scenes, and to Gordon and his family for tonight. So, Tapalation. Taste coffee, how is it?
Good.
And if you want to have a closer look at the stuff, it's got here.